panel va a ser bilingüe, vamos a hablar en inglés y en español. Yo voy a hablar en español, porque ustedes no quieren escucharme hablar inglés.
We do.
Welcome and thank you. I just want to say, Emilio, Jennifer, Luis y Fernando, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí, muchísimas gracias por permitirnos hacer esto, que esta discusión es tan importante para nuestra comunidad. Así que quiero de verdad agradecerles de todo corazón por apoyar las mismas cosas que estamos apoyando en HOLA. Así que muchísimas gracias y vamos a darles un aplauso. Fernando va a hacer las official introductions of our estimated panelists. Y yo quiero presentar brevemente a Fernando. Fernando es un periodista, lo conocemos muchísimo los actores hispanos de Nueva York porque se ha dedicado durante décadas a cubrir todo lo que se hace en español en la ciudad, en teatro y en muchísimas otras disciplinas. También es profesor de periodismo en CUNY y es director en jefe de la guía cultural y también trabaja como digital manager en HITN.
Bravo.
Me lo aprendí. Así que muchísimas gracias. The discussion is going to be about an hour, and if we have time at the end, we are going to be taking some questions or comments of the audience. We'll see. The moderator will say. Gracias.
Thank you.
Bienvenidos una vez más a otro panel de HOLA. Estamos muy emocionados de tenerlos aquí, a toda nuestra audiencia y desde luego a toda la gente que nos va a ver en las cámaras posteriormente. Quiero presentar primero que nada a las mujeres. Jenny Sánchez. She is an actress, singer, musician, and an award-winner songwriter. Her Broadway credits include The Rose Tattoo, Sunday in the Park with George, On Your Feet, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, Ghost, Woman on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, and West Side Story.
Brava.
Tengo a Luis Salgado. He's an award-winning international director, choreographer, and educator from Puerto Rico, based in New York City. He is the director choreographer of the current national tour of On Your Feet, the musical, the story of Emilio and Gloria Estefan, and most recently directed and choreographed a production of Aida at Stages St. Louis in Missouri. He was the assistant Latin choreographer of In the Heights on Broadway, which won 4 Tony Awards. There is a lot more that he does, but I will leave it. Because we promised to keep it brief.
Yeah.
Emilio was born in the Dominican Republic and raised in the Bronx. Emilio is one of Broadway's most distinguished and sought-after talents. As current chair of the American Theater Wing and a 4 Tony Award nominated costumer designer, but you won the last one.
No, 5 times, but I haven't won yet.
But he will. So he is right here with us. They all are. And
Emilio. I'm already going to be the problem maker. I'm going to interrupt only to say, 5 Tony nominations, come on. Come on. I mean, that's one thing. And you said, did you say current chair of what?
Of the
American Theater Wing? I mean, come on. And then I want to just stress out that not only Jennifer has been in all of those Broadway shows, but she got to do 2 shows at once. One time. So for everybody that doesn't know, Jennifer was one day doing On Your Feet in the afternoon, is this right? And then you were doing something in the park with George at night, or how was that?
You want the whole story? We'll do the short story.
Yeah. Just to warm up.
I was doing On Your, no, I was, so first of all, we have also done 2 Broadway shows together, and we've done a show together, so we've all worked together, which is such a blessing. But I was doing Sunday in the Park with George, and I had left On Your Feet like a while back. But there was this craziness, and there was a flight, and people couldn't get back into town, and so the stage manager called my stage manager to Sunday in the Park with George. I just get a phone call, and he pops up on my phone, and it was the stage manager from On Your Feet, and I literally out loud said, haha, hope he knows I don't work there anymore. First of all, check your attitudes, Jennifer, check your attitude. Why am I always so sassy to myself alone in the room? Doesn't matter. So I pick up the phone, and I was like, hey, Thomas, what's up? And he's like, everyone's out. I already called your stage manager. You have to come to On Your Feet tonight. And it was like already like showtime. So I was going on the train to On Your Feet, and I was like practicing, and we were all trying to get it back together and see if I could remember everything. And then at some point, you just have to like, just take one shot of tequila. Not two, just one, and just be like, it'll come back.
¿Cómo se pueden dar cuenta? Somos viejos conocidos todos. Somos pocos y nos conocemos mucho. Pero bueno, quisiera yo darles una perspectiva rápida. Ustedes seguramente recibieron una hojita cuando entraron, y en esa hojita vienen unos datos que son muy importantes y sobre los que vamos a estar basando nuestra conversación, ¿sí? Yo quisiera que no nos entretuviéramos tanto, pero si alguien desea, desde luego, conversar y compartir la experiencia o lo que tiene su perspectiva sobre esto, pues lo hacemos. Hay dos fuentes que estamos tomando en cuenta, y es uno, el sindicato de Actors Equity, que van a ver los datos allí de 2016 al 2021, y después nos vamos al reporte de la organización Broadway League, que están dándonos los datos del 22 al 23. Es decir, más o menos lo tenemos actualizado, algunos datos van a cambiar, desde luego, pero ahí están, ¿no? Entonces, el primero que ustedes van a ver allí, y del que quisiera empezar, es con Actors Equity. Como ustedes lo saben, Actors Equity es el sindicato de los actores. Y entonces, talking about total contracts, you will see there is a first, like a line. We have the first categories from 2016 to 2019, then 2020, and then 2021. So, if you are familiar with the BIPOC concept, is Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. So the contrast is between BIPOC performers or workers and white European Americans. So the first one, really quick. 2016 and 2019, all those 3 years together, the BIPOC people were hired at, out of all the contracts, roughly 20% will go to BIPOC performers. And then 64% will go to white European Americans, which is 1 to 3, 1 to 3 ratio. Es decir, de uno de cada tres, 1 out of 3 of those contracts will go to BIPOC people. Then in 2020, the white European contracts will decrease about 10% to 50%, but the BIPOC didn't increase that much. However, by 2021, we are talking about a 28.6 of the contracts going to BIPOC performers and 52 to the white European American performers. So we're barely now, we were at the beginning at 1 out of 3, we're now at 1 out of 2. We don't really know what happened here. I will throw in some pandemic data, some George Floyd, a lot of things happened there. We don't really know exactly what was the reason, but who would like to comment on this? I know it's tough, but Luis, ¿qué te parece esto?
Al agua. Well, number one, what I'm thinking to say is that the numbers are growing, which is good. And you can also debate like, oh, are you confirming with the numbers, right? But if we look back at when HOLA started and the foundation of HOLA itself and the mission that it was created to do, the necessity of advocacy that was at that time, when Raúl Juliá or Miriam Colón were working, at what percentage were we then? Like, we don't have that comparison here. And probably that was 0.0.1, right? And so, like,
0.001.
so when we look at the numbers, yes, we want more, yes, we deserve more, but the numbers are increasing within the decade.
Significant.
And so I want to recognize that. I also, want to recognize that we are all thrown into the BIPOC sort of pot.
Yeah.
And you just said Black, Indigenous, people of color. But in that, there's a big division of a lot of cultures that are not only isolated into the Hispanic, Latino sort of perspective. So within this 28%, then we can make the question again, how many of that is for Latinos versus Black versus Indigenous? And most likely the Indigenous number will go back to where we were talking about Raul Julia and Miriam Colón time, right? And that's still something to fight for. So I just want to create awareness on what those numbers are. I guess I'll start there.
Okay.
That's okay.
Well, thank you very much. One of the other charts will be the average weekly salaries for BIPOC people and white European workers.
Wow.
Okay? That's table number 2. Sorry if I am being so school-driven with these, but I wanted to take these as the reference, and then we can expand on everything that we need. El salario semanal de los trabajadores, de los empleados, que se identificaban como gente de color y gente blanca, si ustedes lo ven allí en el 2016 y en el 2019, they were pretty much similar. They were, compared to the total average, just to say, the principal player, right, in a play, the average was $682.79.
This is on equity what contract?
Yes, of course. This is
But on what contract?
on, I would say,
Because these numbers are low.
yeah.
These numbers are really low. So there's no specificity on what contract we're
No.
referring to.
The only specificity is the category that we have. A principal role, I would imagine, in a play, a principal in a musical, the chorus, the stage manager, and the assistant managers.
Well, let's go on. But
It's just, also you have to keep in mind, this is an average of the 3 years.
Right.
It's not the exact amount, it's just the average of that. Of course, 2016 will be lower than 2019, I would imagine, right, considering inflation. But
we'll go by this number, but
Yeah.
Okay.
So, what I wanted to say in these, and Jennifer, you are, of course, a performer as well. So, look at they're pretty similar, the amount of the salaries, weekly salaries, according to this report. So, look at if you were in a play, $664.82, and if you were BIPOC, and then if you were white, $665.81. So, it's not a significant difference. So basically, the union is saying that they're similar.
They're gonna offer everyone minimum. I'm kidding.
No, you're not.
Was it real?
No, but you have to begin with,
Yeah.
to keep the show up,
Yeah.
especially
And then one of the most
in this
interesting.
economy.
No, go on.
I mean, just that initial offers, they're gonna try to just keep everybody as low and base salary as possible, just because of all the running costs of what it takes to, just an article came out yesterday or something about, the model of Broadway being, I don't wanna say the article said broken, but like that nobody knows how to be financially successful in live theater anymore. There's a Variety article that just came out yesterday about that. But this speaks to that, some of that, I think.
Now, this, of course, is not the salary of a name of a star, right? Because a star will definitely.
But usually a star is the principal. Very few shows open on Broadway, especially a play, without a name. Because a name is what sells tickets. And tickets is what bring audiences. And at the end of the day, it's the audiences that pay for everything. So this might be a ensemble member.
Well, I have a lot of questions. This feels regional / off-Broadway salaries.
Yeah. Basically, no one's making any money on Broadway. Very few shows are, like the big ones, Hamilton, Wicked,
Yeah.
The Lion King. Those are the 3 shows that always make over $1 million. Because you have to make over $1 million a week to be able to run a successful show. So imagine a lot of these theaters were built in the turn of the century. So you might have, the largest theater holds what? Maybe 15,
The largest, 15 to 17.
which is the Marquee, maybe?
Yeah.
Or
The Broadway?
The Broadway.
The Broadway.
The Winter Garden is
1,500 seats. Imagine 1,500 seats, you gotta try to make $1 million a week. So your ticket prices are really high, which Fernando will get into the average cost of a show versus what people make to be able to come see a show.
But this is why I question these numbers, because it's important that if the reference is 682 and you have a cast of 30, the
Yeah.
equation is very different than if you have a cast of 30 at $3,000 a
Right.
week. And so it's a big difference in the calculation. And in order for the shows to work in what I think we're discussing, commercial theater, you need the commerce to work efficiently so that the not gets paid. Is basically what you're saying.
Basically, a play costs from $6 to $9 million to put a play. That's a play. A musical is $10 to $15 million, and that doesn't guarantee that
Used to be.
No, I'm not 15. I think is right now is where it is, and that doesn't guarantee that your show's going to be a hit. And you still have to pay your performers. You still have to pay for the building. You still have to pay for a lot of things. And initial
The
investment,
union crew, IATI.
everyone gets a piece of that pie.
Which is the last amount of data we have from Actors Equity is 2021, and just the principal for a musical, the average is $1,083, the weekly average. A BIPOC performer will get 1,154, and the white European American will get 1,065.79. So the tendency here is reversing, like it's going more towards the BIPOC performer, and this is, of course, in a play, in a musical, chorus, stage manager, or assistant stage manager.
Yeah. But also, it also depends on what type of show it is.
Right.
I mean, I've done musicals where my entire cast of 30 were people of color, and I've done shows where my entire cast have been non-people of color. So that always skews the numbers, but I mean, it's a hard business. Until we get producers, Latinos, that want to invest in theater, then that's how you change the numbers.
Say that again.
To the camera. Once you get Latinos who want to invest in theater is how you change the numbers. Because if you're a producer, you produce what you like or what you want, or what's going to sell. You know, it's hard to have a producer that's not of our culture to really want to support it or even bring it up front if they don't think that the audience is not there. And then the audience is not there, the ticket prices are not viable for a lot of people. Not just BIPOC Latinos, it's for anyone who doesn't make a certain amount of money in this city, really can't really enjoy the Broadway theater. That's why it's so important to really support the smaller off-Broadway or community theater, even places like Pregones in the Bronx. If you really believe in theater, it doesn't have to be on Broadway.
Amen.
Because theater is universal, theater is in every city, every town, and every country. If you really support it, then you have to find it where it is. And I came to theater late, so I know from a very blue collar, mi padre trabajaron en factoría, mi papá era un janitor, limpiaba toilet. Entonces el teatro nunca fue una cosa para nosotros tan grande. You know, if it's not in your culture, you don't support it little. It's very hard then when you're an adult to like automatically just turn around and say, I'm going to support Broadway if you never really were never taken to it or your family never was into the theater world.
You're right, and everything is related, as we will see.
Everything.
I just want to jump to a annual household income. So, just around what Emilio is saying. Just look at this slide where it says the annual household income of the Broadway theater board. If it is, depending on the place of residence, it could be New York City, it could be New York suburbs, it could be other places in the US, and it could be from another country.
Yeah.
Just to give you the number. It's not going to be surprising, but once you hear it, it's like, oh my God. So if your place of residence is New York City, and you go to the theater often, your income, your annual income you have is $2,500 to $251,000. Very close to $252,000.
Yeah.
So if you are from the New York suburbs, which is the metropolitan area, $295,000. If you are from another country of another part of the U.S., $287,000. And if you come from another country, your income may be lower, $225,000. But just imagine this. Like, what Emilio said is correct, right? Like, how can a working family afford the theater? This is just Broadway. That's why it is important.
Right.
That's why it's important what you were saying about
Right.
the local theater, the Hispanic theater.
Right. That's what I'm saying. If your support of the theater at large, then it's everywhere. It's not just Broadway. Broadway is the shining object that everyone wants, and I'm very fortunate that I work in Broadway or on Broadway. But I spent 10 years working regionally. Before I got my first Broadway show in 2002, and I didn't get my second Broadway show until 2022. So that was a long span. Well, no, 2013. So I spent 10 years working regionally, just taking any job, whether it was in Atlanta, Connecticut, Detroit, Chicago, Los Angeles, wherever they offered a job, I took it because my thing was I wanted to work in theater. I wasn't saying I want to work on Broadway only because I didn't have a show for 10 years. But yeah, it's expensive. Tickets are expensive. But everything else is expensive in this city. It's an expensive city. Theater is not a requirement to live. It's a choice. It's a luxury, really, to be able to go to Broadway regularly.
Yeah, you're right. Luis.
No, I'm just a little lost. I'm not sure what the topic is because we're talking about the numbers, but we haven't landed at a formal question, so I lack a complete opinion.
No. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to thank you. I just wanted to give a whole background of what we're standing. Now, the thing here is, and I also want to go back to the numbers in a moment, but the thing here is, now that Emilio brought it, Broadway, off-Broadway, and off-Broadway, we have 35, more or less, theater companies that are identified as Latinos here in the city. And we are one of the very few language cultures that have our own resources. We don't need to bring them from another country. We don't need to bring them like in Russia or China, where they bring the companies from their...
When you say our own resources, you mean as far as talent or as far as space?
Everything.
Okay.
Here, as far as everything.
Talent, space, capital.
Capital, we have talent, we have the technical, the talent in front of us.
Okay, I'm with
So
you.
we have everything. Now, what would it need for that type of theater, the Teatro Latino, to grow? What do we need to keep?
Okay, but we're, again, sorry, but we're looking at two very different worlds, right? You're giving me numbers about the Broadway commercial entity, and now you're pivoting the question into what would it take for the Latino theater, but I don't have the same numbers within the Latino theater information.
Oh, the Latino theater, there aren't that many numbers, but they're not as...
So we're talking to very separate things. So I think the main question that was sort of emailed to us, and I with all due respect, right, was the idea of what commercial theater is. So in commercial theater, right, it's profitable theater that you can sell. And in that, we're looking for what it is that our Latino community population, both from the audience market to the performers and all the technical supporters market, contribute, or how are we a part of that in the percentages you presented? True or false? So with that information, I guess where I want to then go to the Latino theater is the contributions of the Latino theater, IATI, Pregones Theater, PRTT, Manuel Moran would say as the Society of Educational Arts. I mean, you can Teatro Círculo, you can go on Repertorio Español. They have created basically a plethora of artists that are in the community saying we're here, we belong, we have talent, and those are the same artists that go from the non-theater profit to the commercial profit, and they represent in different capacities the potential and the audacity that we have as Latino performers, Latino artists. At the same time, those Latino theater goers and those Latino artists that are in the Latino theater market are also the consumers of the commercial theater on Broadway, because we want to learn from or see what's happening in the commercial theater so that we can then, whether it is emulate or challenge what's happening in the commercial theater realm with what we are doing in our quote-unquote smaller theaters that are gigantic to me. So there is a symbiosis that is naturally happening between the Latino theater's influence into the commercial market and somewhat vice versa. So that's how I can relate those two. But I wouldn't necessarily put them to compete in numbers because it's not real. Like the capacity that exists within Repertorio Español will never be compared to the capacity that exists at the Winter Garden. Right. And the funding that Repertorio Español gets to make theater, which employs a lot of people that needs work, it's valuable and important, but it doesn't compare to the salaries that are being provided at the Winter Garden. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, you are. Of course they are. They're two different entities, of course, but the most important thing to me is here how they coexist at the same time, and how can we develop that lack of theater education.
Yeah.
That we.
And there you're getting to something really valuable, because I do think that the answer in both the commercial theater realm and the Latino theater might be the same. You need to collaborate more. I think that Broadway needs to collaborate and learn and go and study and scout what's happening with the Latino market. If they want that population to come and consume the theater, the Broadway theater communities offers, and within the Latino market, which is happening now, but it wasn't happening 20 years ago, these Latino organizations that exist can collaborate and coexist in ways that they support each other a lot stronger, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer, would you like to comment on this? Have you worked?
Well, what I will say is that I think that what you said about collaboration is really true and key. Even with something as simple as like dimming the lights for an artist who has passed, which is a Broadway tradition. They dim the Broadway lights for
the marquees. Yeah.
The marquees for a moment, for a minute or whatever. And there's lately been even controversy around that because some theaters participate, some don't. Did you guys hear about? Anyway, even with something seemingly as simple as turning off your lights and honoring a soul, an artist's passing, has become difficult because there is no communication. A lot of these Broadway houses are independently run, they're independently produced and owned. There's just a few who own all of them. And there's not a lot, the right hand doesn't talk to the left hand, and it's communication, collaboration would benefit, I think, every area. So that's what came to mind for me.
There is a lot of talent, Hispanic talent. Artists and directors as well, and stage manager, but they don't seem to find their way to Broadway. They don't seem to be hired there. According to the Broadway League.
Wait, I want to point out, Rodrigo. Hola, Rodrigo.
Hola.
Can you quickly? You just came to the space. Would you mind coming to the stage real quick? The camera's right here. Could you give us your name and where you're from, if that's okay with you?
Yeah, Rodrigo, I'm from Mexico.
Great, Rodrigo. How long ago you came to New York City?
I came to New York City about a year and a half ago.
And how many opportunities you've gotten in the Broadway field?
I'm currently working on my third Broadway show.
Great. I know you're gonna. I want to point that out equally, right? So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the thank you for the impromptu. According to the Broadway League numbers, the assigned contract to Hispanic and Latin Americans are among the 4 and 6% of all the contracts. And as opposed to these, the contracts for the white or European American artists go from 45 to 70%. So it's, consider yourself very lucky, or you are among that 4% that is privilege. How do we change this?
Education.
Yes.
You have to teach it at home. You have to engage your children into theater while they're young. You have to make it a priority. Also, if you have young theater or artists at home that want to aspire to become artists, you have to support them. I know I grew up in a household that was very work focused, but it wasn't very art focused. The reason that I became an artist was by the grace of God, and everything just lined up together. But you have to teach it at home. We all know what the numbers are. We know what we all need to do, but if you don't know it as a kid or you grow up in it, how can you appreciate it really, in a sense? As an adult, yes, then you have to do the homework to, educate yourself. But I think you kind of have to teach it at home. That's how you change the dynamic.
Yes, and I think that the mentorship, it's the part of the education that I have been more excited and craving the most, right? Because we have an Emilio, 5-time Tony nomination, sitting at the chair of the American Theater Wing, and the knowledge you have passed on to, and I'm not even talking about a kid, yes, of course, the 9-year-old, 10-year-old, seeing you as an example will probably flourish in growth when they're 21, and they're like, I want to follow the footsteps of Emilio. But it's now, there's another Rodrigo who's a costume designer. Remember this 2 years ago, Viva Broadway? I was like, Emilio, I want you to meet Rodrigo because I want to make sure that this younger costume designer gets an opportunity to work with someone like you and learn from you. And I think that at home, my mother doesn't know what, with all due respect to my mom, I love you, but she doesn't really know what art is. And I didn't grow up with art because she couldn't give me that.
Right.
She needed to survive. It's in your numbers. The people that are buying the tickets are getting $250,000. My mom, come on, let's not start a conversation, right? But the teacher that I had he also didn't have the money, but he had mentorship. And so he taught me to do a split. He taught me to do a pirouette. He taught me, to do Valle de Collores. He taught me the poetry of the black culture in Puerto Rico. And he made me better, not with capital, but with knowledge. And I think that that's what you are doing. That's what your example, even in Real Women Have Curves right now. I saw you next to a young generation of performers, and your mastery and expertise in your tools, serves as a mentorship example to a lot of the people that are growing and finding their own way in that journey. When the director choreographer is shouting, I need this done, you know that you need to be on 3. And the new generation is learning from your discipline how to get there. So I think education, but not only at home, not only in the schools, but education among ourselves. Education in a way that, because back in the day we used to sit by the fire and tell stories. We don't do that anymore because we have freaking Instagram, right? But the fire now, it's us being able to say, I've learned this in the last 24 years I've been in New York. And I'm going to share it, challenge it, and expose it, so that Amina, who's there, who assisted me last week in Univision's Upfront, can take that knowledge, and when I die, she can keep the battle going. And I think that that's a more important tool.
So what we need is more organizations that will spread this art, that will mentorship everyone. Like Revolución Latina. What you guys do in Revolución Latina is an amazing thing.
Yes, and I do believe that we have the organization. We need to support those organizations by coming together and understand why does a nonprofit exist? It exists to cover up a gap that there is in our society. And the mission of the nonprofit organization should be that that gap no longer happens, and therefore you're no longer needed. But we create work and we want to be needed. We want to get the grants, we want to get the checks. So are we serving the mission we started saying, I'm starting a nonprofit so that I can cover that gap? Or are we just sort of falling into a cycle that is no different than the white privilege you're mentioning here? And so what I think challenges the status quo is getting all of these companies to break among themselves and say, how do we do it better together? You know, how does IATI help Repertorio's audience? How does Repertorio's audience cultivate a generation of young kids that can then consume the SEA product? And how are they all supporting each other so that eventually more HOLA members are happening because we have more knowledge of artistry, and that from that 1,000 people we just impacted by coming together, 100 make it to the Broadway field, and with the name they're making, getting principal salaries, they get to open more opportunities for more people. That's, I think, how we have to do it.
Thank you. Jennifer. I have another slide. I have another graph that I want to discuss with you, all of you guys. But it's about the race and ethnicity of the Broadway audience. Okay? Again, no surprises. I would say about 75 to 80% of the audience that attends Broadway is white. 5.3, and this is only the last year, 5.3% is black, 8.9% is Asian, and 8.8% is Hispanic. There is a very little amount of mixed race and Middle Eastern and others. So basically, out of the minority, let's forget about the obvious part of the, look at this orange one, this bar one, this is the white part. So let's just focus on this little part, which is like the 30% of the theater goers. Hispanics are the second minority that goes to the theater. So I always have these, every time I go to the theater on Broadway, I always have what I call un golpe étnico. It's like a strike. De repente te ves en una función de matiné, entre puras cabecitas blancas, viejitos, blanquitos, y no hay nadie más que uno o dos de otras razas. Does that strike you as an audience, when you are performing up there, you don't see that, but how do you feel when you already know that you're acting for that very specific audience? Does that make a difference?
Well, it's especially like when you've done like shows where you do have like a Latino audience, the energy is so exciting and thrilling. But what I will say is that our stories are universal. And so, I mean, I think that again the answer is communication and collaboration to bring in more diverse audiences to ignite that, because once they do come, they're like, you can feel it. You know, the live theater is it's fireworks. It's something that can't be replaced on a screen. It's so special. And wait, did you say that? I feel you.
I'm just saying at the end of the day, it's about what is produced. Who is producing what content? That's what brings the audiences in. If you don't have a Latino, not that Latino audiences need a Latino show to go to Broadway, which is another thing that maybe we're all too focused that the show has to be Latino to support it.
Yeah.
But if you have, let's say, a Latino producer on Broadway, I don't know, we have a major Latino producer on Broadway. We don't. Or off Broadway. Those are the kind of stories, then it's what you produce is what brings in the audiences. And if producers are looking at the same charts that we're looking at.
Yeah.
If my audience is 75% white, then I'm going to cater to that 75%.
Who can keep the checks cleared?
Who can keep the checks coming? How are you going to change that? Is if a non-white producer says, this story is important and I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is and support it. And then that's when you have the audiences, more diverse audience. Because like you're right, when you have an audience that is, whether it's Latino or color, you feel the difference because they get the nuances of the work. You don't have to explain every little hit.
You don't have to explain the entire culture.
You don't have to explain
in
the
like one
culture.
scene, like before the whole thing starts, you're like, P.S. Like, you know.
You know, so for me, I always come to it's about who is producing and what is the content and what is the material that's being produced.
And out of context, right, the idea of 70% white audience members versus the rest, it's not a problem. They're audience, they're human members, right? It's within the context of this conversation. I think that question we're asking is how do we get to have more Latinos in the theater? Or how do we get to have more Latino producers? Or how do we get to have more Latinos, costume designers, or prop designers, or stage managers,
Directors,
or casting, you know, all of it. That's the question. We want them because they're out there looking for jobs, right? And we want to know that we can facilitate those spaces. The numbers, based on what you read earlier today, are saying that there's evolution. We want, as a HOLA organization, ¿cómo es? Hispanic Organization of Latin Actors, we want to make sure that there's even more embracement to the opportunities in that. And I think that, again, 70% of the people, if I'm talking only commercial theater, are white and they're buying a ticket. That's good. We need them to buy a ticket. The question is, how do we get 70% of the Latinos to show up and buy the ticket too? And there is where the education happens. And every single upfront I do is now, this is year 7 that I've been working, whether it is Telemundo or Univision. They are selling commercials on the market that we are the biggest, #1 consumer in the United States. So when you're watching TV, when you're watching and buying Heineken, Corona, Pepsi Cola, sorry for the commercials, right? Like all of these things, the Latino population is one of the #1 consumer of all of this. We are consumers. But we're not consuming theater. So what we need to do is bring a focus or bring an excitement to theater that people want to consume, right? And so that is done in what you're saying. The producers, like, there's a new generation of producers that are trying to get out there. I mean, I myself produced or invested in Peter and the Starcatcher on Broadway, Gospel on Broadway, took the second national tour of On Your Feet. I think it's the first time that above the title Latino company is running a tour in the United States. So like I take pride on that. I mean, we've been working on that. Revolución Latina, 17 years, work on education. I think that it's about opening the knowledge, the desire, the hunger for what theater can give you. And I think that we don't do that enough, perhaps.
In your, now taking all these contexts to your personal stories, did you receive the help? Did you ever felt that you were working for a specific audience? Because I have to tell you something first. The first time that I realized that I was a person of color was when I moved to this country.
Yep.
Same. It's like, what? I'm of color. What color am I? No, really. And it sounds funny, but it's not when you come to think of it.
Same.
Was it easy for you guys in this Broadway league, and I don't mean the organization, but start playing this? We know that Rodrigo was very lucky, 4%. But how about you guys?
Was it easy? It's never easy. I mean, when people meet me, they don't automatically say Latino. My entire life I've gotten African American. So that's already. So to me, it's an advantage. I've done African American shows, I've done Latino shows, I've done non-Latino shows, but it's never easy. I came up, I'm much older than my panel's mates. I came up in a time when, I mean, I'm still sometimes the only person of color, Latino, black, white, whatever you want to call it, in a room of 50, even today, even with my titles and my nominations. And it's never easy. How do we do it? I think Luis is the one that has the magic key to it, because he looks at it a more holistic way. And my career, I've always been focused on commercial, getting the job, and being successful. So when I sit in a panel with someone like Luis Salgado, who just doesn't think of himself, who thinks of the greater ecosystem of theater, I think that's the way to do it. But it's not, I mean, he can tell you it's not easy. Jennifer can tell you it's not easy. You know, they perform 8 shows a week, you know, for whatever that amount of money. Even if it's, let's say, even if it's $1,500 a week, imagine doing 8 shows a week for that. And the toll it takes on your body. So, you know, I just love what I do. I work hard, and I've gotten a lot of good breaks. But it's also, I'm prepared. So when you do get that call, if it takes 10 years, that you're ready for it. You know, and I look at like I said, Jennifer and Luis, and they do the hard work. I'm a costume designer.
That's pretty tough too.
Oh my God, no, but I mean in the sense of like, in the bigger scope of things, this is the hard work. My job ends when the costumes are on stage. To that point, then the director had to say, the producers have to say, everyone has an opinion about it. So, you know, what I think about it is not that important anymore. My job is to get it on stage. And I look to my 2 panel mates as Latinos leading the charge of what has to happen for us to really be included in these graphics. But, you know, America's a non-black world, a non-colored world for now. So they're gonna be the highest percentages of everything for now. Give it 20 more years and that'll be a whole different story, but you know.
According to the census, by 2060,
that's what I mean.
1 out of 3 Americans will be of Hispanic heritage.
Sure. And I hope they come to theater.
Yeah. Then
2060.
Yeah.
That'll be a hell of a season.
Jennifer, tell us a little bit about your coming to Broadway and making it there.
Well, it's so funny because, like, you know, from the outside looking in is so different than being inside of it. I wrote this song one time that, you know, I was like, always remember that, you know, someone looking in my window, like peering into my window at, you know, the things that you have curated your life to be, would look in and look at my life and go, bitch, you're doing good. But, you know, I came here with my son, who is, I came here with him when he was 6, as a single mother, to be a musical theater, to work in the arts, because I felt so deeply that was my calling. And I also wanted an easy life.
Come to Broadway.
But all I know is that you have to follow your calling, and it was not an easy road, certainly. But you know, I've always thought in the last years that, you know, to get more Latinos in this and that, and to get more diverse, and for the rooms to look more like what real life is, you know, that I've always thought, like, the people at the top, and I still think this, yes, the people at the top, the people making decisions, the people who are casting, directing, you know, bringing in all these people, but it's also just, I realized more recently that it's us.
Yeah.
You know, who took me in when I moved here, and I had my little son, and I did not have an agent, and I did not have an equity card, I didn't have a union card. Who took me for margaritas and and gave me good advice? Doreen Montalvo. Who held my hand during my first big callback for In the Heights on Broadway, which I did not get. And I, but, and I like remember crying in my room, being like, if I can't book this, can I book anything? You know what I'm saying? But you know, she was there for me, and then later I was there for her. Like, it was, and it really is us, and we really do have to hold each other up and bring each other in, because that's what the community is.
It's always been hard. It gets harder, but the easy part was actually the commercial thing for me. So it was hard because my mom did not want me to go to a rehearsal or to miss classes to do this thing. It was hard because I was, you know, scream at from the other side of the school, you faggot, you know, because I was in the arts. And my son just told me that happened to him this week, and he cried. And it's like, dude, I went through that. I got you. Like, you're, you know, like the fact that culturally, our communities are still not embracing the fact that art is just a human thing, not a bit. And if I am gay, what's the problem, right? Like the kind of thing. So there's more backtrack percentage, maybe even within our culture of acceptance, than there is in some of these numbers from where I sit and look at it. And so it's hard now, fighting my butt daily to not only be more of a director choreographer in my personal goals, but to, with that, provide employment to so many people. Like post-pandemic, I've done 18 shows, and within that, directly employed about 700 people, indirectly about 5,000 people. And so those are the numbers I want to be able to promote every year. The fact that somebody like Pablo, I walked in and it's like, me llevaste a Samuel, you know, true or false. And Samuel was able, a Venezuelan migrant from, you know, Caracas that came to New York looking for an opportunity, just toured the entire United States for about 2 years as Emilio Estefan. And he still carries a thick accent as thick as Raul Julia. And that is important, right? And so we need to balance the rhetoric of what we're saying. So it's hard because in every single time that I'm trying to do one of those things, there are 3 points that I'm going to talk about now that people don't understand. It's the cultural differences, right? I will walk into a production meeting or with producers or sit down at SDC, getting to know all these white producers, and they will look at me like I'm crazy because I'm saying I love art. Like literally, I want to open my thing saying I love art. I come from like doing the split en el patio de una escuela, and they look at me like, what's your problem? Right? And so if I say that to a Latino producer that, you know, like Cedric, that represents the Dominican Republic, and he's going to understand who I am. And he's going to say, okay, great, with that, what do we do? And that is the difference when we say we need producers. You know, the other part is you walk into the city and you don't know how to audition. Because in Puerto Rico or in the Dominican Republic, in Peru, in Colombia, in Argentina, it's different. The system is different. What you go through, actually, it's different even in segregation, because musical theater is done, or used to be done a lot there, with isolating. The singers are singing, the dancers are dancing, and the actors are acting. So are we doing musical theater? We're putting together a musical piece, but are we doing musical theater? Are we exercising the triple threat as the New York market demands that you do it? So of course, when you walk into an audition room in New York City for the first time, you're like, holy shit. Like, I have to now compete with people that have sang their entire life. I have to now compete with people that have acted the greatest texts. And then I have to also dance next to a variety of styles. So yeah, it's hard. Broadway is hard. But at the same time, I can say that was the easy part for me. Walking in and saying, this is who I am, and having, you know, somebody like David De Silva or Dan Shaheen take me in for my first off-Broadway show on Fame on 42nd Street, when it was a TV national audition, over 500 people going around the block, I made it to be the last one. So that was a fair game. It wasn't about race, it wasn't about ethnicity, it wasn't about my accent, it was about talent. And so I think that the industry, for the most part, is about talent. But we have to be ready, like Stanislavski used to say, for when that opportunity comes. And that is not just in one area. You know, and just to finish quickly, the other big thing we don't learn is money. We don't know how to manage money, because in our community, the same way that arts is not valued, understanding how to do a budget and how to survive with very little sometimes is not taught to us. So we're struggling day by day, and then you have to take 20 other jobs that take you away from those auditions or from your training and preparation. So it's hard to compete. So that's what those numbers tell me. How do we help the individual artists, producers, creatives to be able to give themselves into the arts so that they can actually compete? And that's what we need to foster within our nonprofit organizations.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Just in case we were wondering, where do Broadway audiences come from? The Hispanic and Latino, 10.6% come from New York City, 9.3% come from the suburbs, 7.1% from other parts of the US, and 10.8% from other countries, which is the highest number of the Broadway theater goers that are Hispanic or Latinos come from another country. This is Spain, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Chile, wherever they are here as visitors. So we have to take this into account. We're working also for them, even though it's only 10%. Yeah, this is revealing, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's, I think, for audiences across the board. Most of the Broadway audiences small percentage come from the city, but a large percentage come from tourists. They're the huge part of the audiences. That's the biggest market. And then people from the suburbs, and then we get city dwellers. But it's a tourist. Broadway is an entertainment. It's show business.
Broadway!
And in case you were wondering which is the most preferred type of show, it is of course a musical.
Of course, music crosses all boundaries and borders and cultures. So it's easier for someone that's not from the culture, whatever the subject matter is, to be able to go into it through the music. A play, that means you have to know the language, you have to hear. There's too many things for a play. But I understand.
And yet, post-pandemic, I find that the industry itself is in a difficult spot, correct me if I'm wrong, with how to present a musical, because the interest level, even the buying ticket possibilities, and what are the audience after, where political content in the last 8 years, our political realities in the United States have been pretty complex, right? And we're about to go into complexity again. And there's a big question mark in what is it that the audience wants or doesn't want to see, which is affecting the choice selection of what is presented on Broadway today. And that's a bigger issue for me than anything else, Because then you're, unfortunately, with all the respect, you're getting a lot of crap also produced. So that people buy a ticket and feel entertained with the escapism that feels to be needed for audiences, but there's a lot more to be given to the audiences too, which is part of the problem. If I'm gonna pay, my son got good grades one day and I wanted to celebrate him, so I was, Papi, I'm gonna take you to see MJ. MJ was in previews. I kid you not, I spent $600 between my wife, myself, and my son. Don't think that because I do theater, I'm rich. I'm not. I don't get that income.
He's not in
I'm not in those numbers.
No.
And so, and I went and I wanted to give my son, who understands art, who is nurturing a home that loves arts,
Would be thrilled by MJ.
who will be thrilled by
Perfect
MJ.
audience member.
He fell asleep 20 minutes and I wanted to jump out of the window. Because what do you do? I just spent $600 that I could have paid half of my mortgage with that. And so it's a thing. So you need to give an offer to the demand that people say, I just paid $600 and I would do it again. And that's not happening. And so when that's not happening, our consumerism of this art form gets less and less, especially when we're not in those numbers of income. And that is part of the problem. It's a whole thing. I think the word is holistic. It goes way beyond what I think we can control. And that is why coming together in one space and trying to collaborate in how we make it better for our community, for theater, for art's sake, is super important.
Well, thank you everyone, because chatting with you and getting your opinions, it really makes a difference for all of us, for all of us in the audience and definitely for all of us who will be watching this later. Now, before we say goodbye and we go to the public to answer some questions, I would like to have a round of very quick questions, lightning questions.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give you a question and we're gonna go in round uno, dos, tres, rápido, tú decides, you will choose between one or the other. So we're gonna, since we're all foreigners here, we come from different parts of the world, we're gonna see how much New York is in our veins.
Oh my God.
All right, so Emilio, let's get started with you. Very easy, uptown or downtown?
Uptown.
Jenny, Chinatown or Little Italy?
Little Italy.
Taxi amarillo o Uber o Lyft?
Uber.
Emilio, Brooklyn Bridge or Manhattan Bridge?
George Washington Bridge.
Jenny, Central Park or Prospect Park?
Prospect Park.
Yankees or Mets?
Yankees.
Emilio, pasta o arroz?
Arroz.
Macy's or Bloomingdale's?
Nordstrom.
Bagel, with cream cheese or mantequilla?
Mantequilla.
West Side or East Side?
West Side.
Grand Central or Penn Station?
Grand Central. We got those cute stores.
The Empire State or the World Trade Center?
The World Trade Center.
World Trade Center. And this is gonna be for these two are gonna be for all of you.
Okay.
So you can say it right away. Radio City or Carnegie Hall?
Radio City.
Radio City.
And this is the most important one. Broadway or off-Broadway?
Both.
Broadway.
Both.
It should be both.
It should be both.
It should be both.
I do have to admit, it's hard. It's hard sometimes, and I say this because Pablo is now performing in a show at Repertorio, and I want to go see it. Rosalba, I mean, come on, Rosalba's season feels so good, and I can be better at making the time to get to the theaters and support more of the Latino theater. I think Gabi and I, when we started Revolution Latina, we were really hungry to be around and see everything we could, but it gets really hard. Mm-hmm. And especially when you're commercially competing, you need to stay in tune with what the market is offering too. And so, but both. So if you're in this room, show of hands, how many of you have seen this year a show in one of the Latino theaters that are beautiful?
All of them.
Wow.
Bravo.
Good job.
Bravo.
If I'm hired on a contract, I'd much rather be hired on a Broadway contract because then you can, almost afford to live here. Almost. But if I'm gonna go watch a show, I prefer to go see an off-Broadway show because I like the intimacy. I like to see the sweat. I like to be there with them. I find it to be such a special experience. But they're both very valuable to the heartbeat of the theater community.
And I feel like you're always surprised. Last time I went to Repertorio, they were doing the flamenco one. This was 3 months ago, and oh my God, it was such a beautiful piece of theater. That again, because the thing that we haven't talked about here, we haven't even used the word, is art. Mm-hmm. And that's a question I have, right? What is art? Where do I find it? Because I think ultimately the artists and the artists and the consumers of this art are looking for art. Are we doing that? Question mark.
Well, and I think it speaks to some of the other things, Broadway has a big nut to meet every week, so they've got to sell those tickets. They're taking a huge risk by investing all of this $12 to $15 million. Off-Broadway production is also a financial risk, but there's more room. So you can have something that's a little left of center that you're going to do for 3 months off-Broadway here. So you do have more creative license, I think, when you're speaking of art.
Yeah, and to correct myself, what is art, right? I'm not saying that what's being presented is not art, but it's art with formulas that affect the outcome of the audience experience, right? And so I can go into specifics because I have them really clear with this season in particular, but the books suffer because, no? Okay.
Yeah. Art is subjective.
Yep.
Yeah.
What I call art may not be someone else's version of art. So it's individual.
Yeah. But for example, I fought really hard for dancing. And people can like or dislike dancing, but what a cool adventure of dance art form was presented in that show. And it got no recognition whatsoever last year in the 20th season. And then this season, last minute, comes Illinois and takes so much recognition, you know, and I question those things. I just question those things in general. And I like everybody that's involved. I am so thrilled. There are Latinos in principal roles in Illinois. Bravo, I take my hat, it's needed. But when I compare the commercial industry and I question art, there's where I go. And we can do a panel on this alone.
Oh, there it is. There's the next one. Hola will hear that we'll take advantage. Algo más de que tenemos que terminar ya y antes de irnos tengo tiempo para unas preguntas del público, un par de preguntas rápidas.
Unas poquitas.
Vamos pues, entonces si hay alguien que quiera hacerle una pregunta a nuestros panelistas, por favor.
I don't know if it's more a question, but more of a comment, but it just stuck with me what Emilio says, and then you backed it up. The collaboration aspect. When I think of how can we contribute to uplift our existing Latino off-Broadway theaters so that it gets to the white European population to then want to come and see the Latino theater, even if it's in a different language. That's getting some buzz. I'm curious, let's go. So what is it that we need to steer up and do amongst these Latino theaters to be able to reach those audiences, to be curious enough to come and see our theater?
Emilio said the answer to this from where I sit, which is producers that are from our diaspora as well. You know, like I can go historically into, there was a show called Celia the Musical. You can say whatever you want about the show, but the show was there. And the 70% white audience, European audience, were there. I was in the theater and I saw them there, right? So there's a Latino there, but they were consuming one of our products as well. La Barberia, directed by Wallace Vasquez as well, at New World Stages as well, perform and successful. There's an Argentinian flamenco artist that... no, ¿cómo se llama ella?
Valeria?
No, it's Valeria. No, it's an Argentinian dancer choreographer that has also been able to bring products to the New World Stages market, and it's been consumed by the 70% audiences. So, and I was thinking about one more big example that I forgot now. And now with, you know, Sergio Trujillo, it's expanding, because we all know we got to go beyond, whether we like it or not. Like, I started as a dancer who then turned into an actor that then turns into, I have to sing, oh my God, do I do it, right? That then turn into, like, you have to keep going because it's the only way you feel the gap. And so Sergio is now doing that, and he and his partner, Jack, are producing Real Women Have Curves. So I'm really interested in what that's going to be coming to Broadway, hopefully, soon. Yeah.
Everybody.
So I think having producers that represent and bring material that also get that audience to support our work, and that work doesn't only have to be Latino work. You know, it's made by Latinos, it's made with Latinos, but it doesn't only have to be Latino stories.
But also, not only producers, you need the media.
Yes.
The Latino media has to support these theaters. They have to do shows on them. They have to do, I don't know.
I was talking to Fernando before we started this that, you know, within the commercial Broadway market, there's a desire to appease the Latino media and stations and every press and marketing, but there's not an awareness or an educated know-how of what our audience consumes in that. So like you're basically having somebody Latino in your team, but you're saying go talk to the New York Times, and it's like, and then the New York Times won't necessarily open the doors to that person. So you really need to collaborate and create marketing teams that collaborate, keyword again, that one is an expert in the Latino market, one is an expert in the American market, and they coexist and find ways to stimulate the interest in both simultaneously, but not through the same tools, because we don't respond to the same things. And so these are things that I think, thanks to Presencia Latina, I've been seeing for the last 20 years, but we have yet to further attack as a community collective, you know.
Was the Nuestro story, the Spanish, was that would you say is that an example of that mix?
No, that's an excuse. Sorry, with all due respect, I feel like that show Lynn was hyped, In the Heights was successful. Let's bring the Latino kid to put some Spanish words and let's see if we can expand the market. It was a good attempt, but it was a failed attempt too, because in the middle of the journey, most of those Spanish lyrics were taken away. I actually think that it was more proactive what Ivo Van Hove did last time, which he shaped the entire status quo of West Side as a whole and created something that really made people, whether they hate it or love it, created something that people were more intrigued and passionate about, again, for good or for bad. And I think that did more service to us as Latinos than the prior one.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Eileen. Thank you for being here. This was an amazing conversation. My question is around marketing. Do we feel like we are putting enough efforts in marketing for our shows, whether it is on Broadway or off Broadway, just in the Latino community, just Latino shows?
No.
Produced? No.
I don't think we're
And that's why we're not getting
Right.
the audiences that we
So
need.
that's-
I don't even think we're hitting the minimum market.
That's not, so that's the Latino media,
Of course.
whatever is Univision, Telemundo,
And that's
El
just
Diario,
one-
whatever.
No, and you have,
If they don't support, they
you
support.
are 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, you're 100% correct.
Yeah.
Every time I've been working, I mean, for 20 years in the media here, Hispanic media, every time I tell them, oh, I'm gonna do a review or we're gonna have these artists, they always say, no, why do you need that? We don't need that, we don't need that. No, stop wasting your time.
And it's part of the
And
problem.
it's like every time, it's like, I feel like that fly that.
But that's
It's
huge,
trapped.
that's how our community consumes information.
You have to give it to them,
We have
and
to
they
give it to
have
them.
them decide what they will like it or not. Not us, not
No.
the immigrants, but how about the kids? Our children. That's for them.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard reality. The answer from my end is yes and no. Have we done enough? No. Have we done? Yes. And
Always more.
even with, you know, we have to also get out of our comfort zone. Like I was doing Rocky, and I'm nothing in the creative team of Rocky. I have nothing to do with the property, right? Other than do my job, come dance, box, do your thing. But I was on their butts about, okay, this is my passion. As much as I love theater, I love boxing. And so like, how can we go to Madison Square Garden where my community is there? How can we go, like all of this thing, the Broadway boxing was happening right in front of where the Richard Rodgers sits in 46th Street. They used to do Broadway boxing there. Like, can we go to, like, where do we advertise? How do we get, because if you can get, this is the Andy Blankenbuehler secret within the Heights. Like, when we created the show, Andy's point was always like, I want the football player to want to come see our show. And so I find that to be such a drop of knowledge of how to market and create a show that the boxer Latino community, like again, people say over 70, white, Jewish, like there's a stereotype of what that consumer that carries the big dollar is. But we buy the football, we buy the boxing match, we buy the pay-per-view. What are we offering?
So we have the we have the resources. Is where do we put it into?
Yeah. So you know, going to Cotto's fight and advertising Rocky the Musical there. So that the wife that doesn't want to go see the boxing says, oh, I'll go watch boxing with you if you take me to Rocky the Musical for the love story. But really, and so those are the sort of like think outside the box kind of questions that I wish that we were asking within our field and our communities and our collaborations more, because we might end up having bigger results. Yeah. And the other issue, sorry, but it's that sometimes people like Fernando will come in and say, I want to go to Moulin Rouge right now has like 4 Latinos in the show or more. And I want to interview them. And then the PR team says, but can it be only in English? Because not all of the Latino represented people in the show necessarily speak Spanish. So that damages the relationship with Telemundo Univision interviews, for example, which are the biggest broadcasting. So like now who can speak from that show in the Spanish native language that the channel is requiring so that we can hit the big market. So it's a, again, it's a whole thing of issues that we have to be addressing. I talk too much, I'm sorry.
No, gracias.
¿Una pregunta más?
Ok, la última y nos vamos.
Ricardo, ¿tú tienes una pregunta?
Sí, tengo una pregunta muy importante por acá. ¿Qué tan importante es para ustedes o qué posibilidades o cuánto es, qué tanta posibilidad le ven a ustedes de montar un show latino en español, obviamente también con su una función siguiente en inglés, pero ya que tenemos tantos hispanos llegando a la ciudad, ¿cuándo creen ustedes?
It's been done. It's been done. Again, La Celia was performed half of the shows in Spanish and half of the show in English. If I'm not mistaken, La Barberia was done as well. But bigger conversation. Chicago the musical has tried, and Gabi was a part of Chicago for over a decade. But the producers of Chicago the musical have tried not only to bring in their principal roles a big scope of Latino representation from Jaime Camil, Marcos Uninos, I mean, you name it, standing in principal roles to bring that market, but they also did a one Spanish night. Did they do the Spanish night?
No, the
No, they
pandemic
didn't.
came up and they couldn't. They were going to swap companies, which is, I think, a brilliant idea when you have two productions of the same production running in different countries, in different languages. And because of the value and there's not much set or costumes, it would have been an easy thing to do, to bring the Mexican company here and the American company to Mexico, but the pandemic got in the way.
And also because of the pandemic, they were preparing a Death of a Maiden, ¿cómo se llama? La Muerte y la Doncella, Death and the Maiden. La Muerte y la Doncella from Ariel Dorfman. They were going to do it with the cast, with the bilingual cast. And they were going to put it on Broadway, and it was going to be Pedro Pascal. It was going to be, I can't remember the other two, but all of them, the three main characters, will be performing in Spanish and in English.
Well, and to give credit where credit is due, the Met just did it. The Met just presented a Niño with opera singing in both Spanish and English.
I was about to say it's more common in opera.
And I was like, whoa.
This season also opened with Love, el amor en la adaptación del Amor en los tiempos del cólera.
Florencia en el Amazonas.
Florencia en el Amazonas,
Yeah.
la obra de Daniel Catán, que es un mexicano, y cantaron en español. Después de casi 100 años, se escucha una ópera en español en el Met.
So again, I don't want to sit on the conformist chair whatsoever, but I also don't want to not acknowledge that things are happening. You know, and the fact that the Met just seeing a Niño there and again, having my Niño, being able to hear both languages and such an empire of a space like El Met, that if we go back again to history, was a district of the Puerto Rican people.
Right.
That was taken away, and we were migrated uptown to Spanish Harlem to create this cycle of art thing. So in that space where the Puerto Ricans used to live and were literally kicked out, finally there was an opera that represented both languages. And I think those are important things to acknowledge.
But how many in the Latin community even knew that it was there? I don't think, not many, I don't think.
Which speaks to...
Which is, again, going back to the media. If that's happening, then...
Yes, and media and capital, because, sorry, now we're getting good. Let's stay here one more hour. because when you study what happens in Latin America, and whenever it was that I went to do In the Heights in Brazil, I don't remember now how long ago, probably 10 years ago, I was very surprised by the sort of the system of economy that is put into creating a musical production in Sao Paulo, and the pros and cons that comes from the government money that is sustaining that production. This morning I had a meeting for a production that I'm going to do there next year, and they were really explaining how this is going to happen, and I'm thrilled, because the big corporations that have to pay whatever amount of taxes, the government is saying, instead of paying us the taxes, give it to the arts.
Oh.
So let's say that I don't know, for lack of a better example, let's say that Coca-Cola Brazilian style just owes $300,000 to the government in taxes. That money, instead of giving it to the state, is going to be given to the cultural arts thing. And so when you add that on, now there's a pot of millions of dollars that get distributed to cultural revenues and development. And when the ticket buyer that no longer is needed for the producer now can produce art because I have to not worry about the economy. The ticket buyer dollar has to then come back to the cultures. So it's creating a system through the tax form that is multiplying the cultural impact that happens in their society. When are we doing that in the States?
It's overdue.
Thoughts, Emilio?
Capitalism. Everyone wants to hold on to their dollar. And you want a return on your dollar. That's the thing. You know, we're asking people to be empathetic and fair with their money. You know, we don't have a control. I don't think we'll ever get to this country. We were just in Madrid, and 20% of their theater is sustained by the government.
That's right.
So they do it. I mean, we should be able to do it. We don't even have the NEA any longer that really gives grants. It's non-for-profit, like Luis, is some of what the wing does. We have to invest in ourselves.
Yeah. Or we're going further and further into the Hunger Games reality.
May the odds be in your favor.
Pablo.
Bueno, yo simplemente quiero, para despedir y dándole las gracias a todos ustedes, I do have a takeaway and a couple of announcements to say goodbye. The takeaway, I think it's just from here, right? So what I'm saying this is we are, and I've been studying this in my role leading HOLA for a long time, and it's sometimes discouraging how this is always 5-6% of representation on Broadway, on theater in New York, in film, and as you said, Emilio, right? The problem is also that producers, if I don't have the numbers on the top of my head, but they are about 1%, 2%, 2.3% of directors, producers, 1%, right? So that's why we are, I think it's so important what Revolución Latina is doing, what HOLA is doing, what La Vía Cultural is doing to bring people to see all of that, and to every one of us is doing and is going to do, because I think we need to be vessels of change, right? So please do support HOLA, do support theaters like this theater, like IATI, that are doing wonderful work in Spanish and in English by Latinos, and go to see Broadway. We are 5%, 6%, but also we are 8.9%. We're a lot higher the audience of Latinos that go to Broadway than that they are represented on Broadway. And we are growing, and this is the fastest growing, right? So that's a little takeaway. The announcement, we do have some wine, and let's go mingle and let's get to know each other in the lobby of the theater. The other announcement is, I forget, I'll tell you there. Thank you so much. Gracias IATI, gracias a Fábrica de Estrellas, gracias a todos ustedes. Nos vamos.
Oh my God.
¿Ya viste que son de concha?
I'm upset.
They are.
They're like furry.
You know this is the Mexican fantasy. The concha.
It looks like cotton candy.
Hey guys,